Extreme weather, digital overload, and a global loneliness epidemic are no longer just headlines. They are compounding stressors currently impacting the mental health of millions. When these pressures overlap, how does a society actually begin to treat the resulting trauma? To find the answer, we have to look back a century, to a time when psychology had almost no capacity to help at all. In 1896, Leitner Whitmer opened the world's first psychological clinic at the University of Pennsylvania. But if you stepped inside, you wouldn't find anyone practicing therapy or offering a talking cure. The early field was dedicated to the rigid measurement of individual deficits, essentially testing children to document learning disabilities. At its inception, clinical psychology was a science of identifying problems, but it lacked the framework to actually solve them. The field of psychology's first major trial arrived with the outbreak of World War I. Psychologists proved their utility to the military by administering the Army Alpha and Beta intelligence tests to mass groups of recruits. The success of these tests in sorting soldiers cemented assessment as the core discipline of clinical psychology for the next 25 years. Psychology had perfected how to diagnose a person's shortcomings, but it remained largely powerless to treat their trauma. World War II proved that the assessment-only model was no longer enough. Thousands of soldiers returned with profound trauma, then known as shell shock, creating a need for care that the world had never seen. Traditional psychiatrists and medical doctors were simply overwhelmed by the sheer volume of psychological casualties. Out of necessity, the U.S. Veterans Administration poured funding into training psychologists to move beyond testing and into active patient treatment. This pivot led to the 1949 Boulder Conference, where training directors agreed that PhD programs must integrate psychotherapy with scientific research. This shift made therapeutic treatments and talk therapy a standard part of psychological practice for the first time. Desperate necessity had forced clinical psychology to evolve from observing the mind to healing it. By 1977, the field recognized that trauma couldn't be fully understood if the patient was viewed in a vacuum. George L. Engel proposed the biopsychosocial model, a framework that expanded the lens of treatment to include three distinct areas. First is the biological, looking at a patient's unique genetics and biochemistry. Second is the psychological, which examines mood, personality, and behavior. Finally, the social circle accounts for environmental stressors, like family dynamics or extreme work environments. This model established the idea that an illness is often inseparable from the environment that triggers it. Fast forward to 2026, and that social environment now includes the physical impact of frequent, severe weather events. Modern psychologists are now actively treating climate-related distress and widespread anxiety about the future of the environment. Behavioral scientists are studying risk perception to understand why some people ignore disaster warnings while others choose to evacuate. This research allows them to engineer warning messages designed to resonate with specific, traumatized communities. But waiting to treat trauma until after these massive events occur has pushed clinical caseloads to an unsustainable peak. The latest evolution of the field is a shift from purely reactive care to proactive prevention. Researchers have found that the first 3 years of life are the most critical period for brain development. This has led to mental health screenings in preschools and efforts to reduce adverse childhood experiences before they can cause long-term damage. Today, clinicians focus on building lifelong executive function and resilience as a standard part of early development. Clinical psychology began as a tool for measuring human deficits, but today it has evolved into a proactive shield, aiming to build resilience in future generations before the damage is ever done.